All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 2026 California PBIS Recognition System webinar. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We will be going through a number of updates on the recognition process, and we thank you for being here with us. With that, we want to always start being good PBISers with our recognition expectations. We have three expectations. One is to be responsible. So everybody in California PBIS, including our larger school network, we ask and we also honor this expectation that we will provide clear details and accurate information for the recognition system process. So really important, provide those clear, accurate, truthful data, and that's going to help this whole process go nice and smooth. Second expectation, we are respectful. One of the things that I just want to acknowledge is that everybody at California PBIS, everybody on the California PBIS committee participates and scores as a volunteer. So as those folks are going through and scoring, please be kind to them. Then lastly, of course, California PBIS, we are awesome. Our hope is that everybody that participates really enjoys the process, that you get something out of it, that you're reflecting on your implementation, and that you see this process as a celebration and something to enjoy. All right. In terms of recognition resources, this year we have a number of new resources. One really important resource, which I want to just take a second and show you, is the new updated recognition worksheets. So each recognition level is going to have its own worksheet this year. We've had worksheets in the past, but these are, of course, new and improved. I have up the gold worksheet here. And you'll notice that it's been rebranded, just looks a little bit nicer. And importantly, there are a number of useful links for that level of recognition. So once you review the criteria at a glance, and you determine what level of recognition you're applying for, we're going to recommend that the first thing you do after that point is download your recognition worksheet, because that's going to be a really helpful resource. On the recognition worksheets, there are links to the webinar recording, so this recording, and the slides also from this recording. So if you want to use those to prep folks at your school site or in your district, of course, we'll have the criteria videos. And importantly, in it is the actual worksheet itself. So if you click on the link, it'll take you down and you'll be able to see every single item for that level of recognition. Very important. And we really, of course, appreciate that whole process. So know those are there. A couple important resources that will be linked, of course, are the recognition videos, the ACER lists, which you will need, which we'll talk about, frequently asked questions, and then, of course, the classroom walkthrough tool, which is specific per level of criteria. So again, use those preparation worksheets and you'll be in a good spot. All right, today's webinar is being recorded. We will make it available to you on our website. It is a webinar, so there is no camera or microphone for participants. That's just the way Zoom sets it up. But we do have the Q&A feature. So we're going to encourage you to, as you go through the webinar, if you have a question, post that question in the Q&A feature. And we will do our very best to respond to all questions today as we go. All right, here's our agenda. We're going to do a quick overview of California PBIS, so know that that's coming. We'll talk a little bit about the the recognition system in general. We'll hit on the timeline for applying for recognition. We'll tell you how you find your region lead contacts, and then we'll do a closing, hopefully with enough time for a little bit of extra Q&A. That's usually our goal. All right, what is this thing called California PBIS? Let's talk about that. All right, so formed in 2012 as the California PBIS Coalition. So you may be thinking, I thought you guys were called something else. That's because we changed our name a couple of years ago. We are now California PBIS. And our network, so we're a network of county offices of education and SELPAs in California serving schools and districts throughout the state. We're dedicated to providing a standard of practice for high quality PBIS implementation. We do that through our regional technical assistance centers, and we do that at that very most rigorous level in alignment with the National Center on PBIS. So how are we doing, folks? So California PBIS and our implementing partners throughout the state, last school year, we had 3,445 schools actively implementing PBIS. That means schools that are using either PBIS assessments or the school-wide information system. There's just over 10,000 schools in California. So if we were in a giant classroom with every school in California, if you look at yourself, you looked at your friend to the left, you looked at your friend to the right, it's likely that one of you would be implementing PBIS, which is a pretty remarkable feat. Now, doesn't matter if we're implementing, if we don't do it well. So we're talking about how well we're implementing in California. So year over year, so in 2015, the tiered fidelity inventory launched. And every year since then, we've seen steady increases in fidelity at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And you maybe have heard that there's a new tiered fidelity inventory, TFI 3.0. We're not using that for recognition this year, but starting next year, we will get into that, and you'll still see quite a bit of information out there about that. All right, a lot of schools implementing. They're implementing well. When they implement well, do we see positive outcomes? So we now have 3 peer-reviewed research studies documenting the outcomes that we've achieved in California. So the folks on this call, all of you out there, have helped contribute to these positive outcomes. So thank you. We've seen positive outcomes at just tier 1 PBIS implementation for suspension for just about all student groups, with some really significant reductions in students with IEPs being sent to alternative education placement. And then we've also seen improved outcomes as schools implement the more advanced tiers. I'll point out the Journal of Positive Behavioral Interventions article in particular. That one was conducted using California PBIS recognition data. So as you're participating, know that your school may be contributing to advancing our research. All right, and then lastly, we just wanted to call out California PBIS recognition is also continuing to grow. So last school year, 2,580 schools participated in the California PBIS recognition system. So it was awesome to see. It's about 1 in 4 schools. So again, pretty amazing data there. How do we do all this work? So one of the things we're really blessed with in California PBIS is a dedicated team. The folks here on this screen are the members of the California PBIS Recognition Committee. So we like to tell everybody that will hear us that we are the hardest working committee in California PBIS. Those folks with stars next to their names, you will probably have a chance to see from or hear from today, either in the webinar itself or in the chat, because they are part of this call. So big thanks to them as well. All right, remembering our why. So we all know that applying for recognition takes quite a bit of energy. So we wanted to call that out. And we also wanted to acknowledge that there are some outcomes we're hoping to get as we apply for recognition. Okay. One of them, of course, is we want schools to take an opportunity and reflect on their PBIS practice. So if you're doing PBIS recognition every year, and you're not thinking deeply about how you're implementing, and you're not improving your PBIS implementation, you're probably missing the mark with PBIS recognition. The other thing that recognition gives us is it gives us a nice store of exemplar schools. So as you apply for recognition, it creates an opportunity for us to tell your story, for your local county offices of education or your local SELPAs also to know where you are, so we can connect you with schools. So really important, helps us identify those exemplars. All right, so what happens when you apply? Well, first you apply. We'll talk about the specifics of that. And then your application is scored. Every single application is hand scored, so know that. Once you are awarded, and around September, we'll talk about the timeline, you will receive an email, a congratulatory email. We'll have a letter in there And then we will also have our electronic decal, which you can see on the screen here. It will have your school name on there as well. And our hope, of course, is that you will post that decal, maybe in your email signature on your school website, and then, of course, at your school using some sort of poster. We will post all that information on the California PBIS website, and we will acknowledge all schools at the annual conference in Sacramento, which we'll hit save the date on before we go today. All right, I mentioned timeline. So here it is. Introductory webinar, January 26, 2026, that is today. So every year, the webinar marks the kickoff of the opening of recognition. So if you're on this call and you're thinking, well, when does all of this actually start? It starts today. So we will open the application window. We'll collect a few additional documents. We'll get those recognition worksheets, should be posted today, if not, early tomorrow. And then you may be wondering, how long do I have to complete the application? You have until May 8th is when the application window closes. It is a hard close, so make sure you apply by then. We will notify schools of any minor application errors by no later than June 5th. So just like in PBIS at your school site, we've got minor errors and we have some major errors. Minor errors are errors that we will allow, encourage, support you in fixing. So if we're going to have some of those, we'll notify you by no later than June 5th. That means if you are applying for recognition, you need to check your email all the way through June 5th, at least give it a quick glance to see if you've got any emails from your local California PBIS Technical Assistance Center. All right, those errors need to be fixed by no later than June 12th. Again, we have quite a fast turnaround to get all of these processed. Notifications will come out in September, so look for them then. And of course, we will display our winning schools at our conference in October in Sacramento. All right, to apply. This is an important part here because this is kind of a must-do, if you will. When you apply for California PBIS recognition, you must use an external evaluator. We call those folks the California Authorized External Reviewers 2.0 because we had an original reviewing process, which we've updated. ACER 2.0s are folks that have experience in PBIS and the TFI, and they have to be external to the school site. So that means if you are a school counselor, you can act as an ACER for another school, but you cannot act as an ACER for the school that you work at. Got to be external, okay? Those folks are going to help with the walkthrough process. They're going to help facilitate the TFI, and they'll be there to answer any questions. They will be visiting your school site, so just count on that happening. Why do we have ACERs? Again, the whole point of all of this, our goal in recognition, is to help schools reflect on their implementation and improve year after year, and having somebody external to the process really helps that. Okay, so we do have a spot on our website at pbisca.org that has additional info about the ACERs and the ACER process. The window to become an ACER is closing soon. So if you are not an ACER and you want to become one, I'm going to encourage you to look into that this week, okay? Because there is a readiness process, a training process, and then there is a quiz that is actually fairly challenging, just letting folks know. And you get through all those things, and then we will certify you as an ACER. All right, there's a lot here. How to prepare. How to prepare. So you are interested in applying for recognition. Maybe you're supporting some schools in that process. Every year we update the criteria. So we're going to encourage you to go to pbisca.org, hit that applying for recognition website, that link there on our website. And then we're going to have you look at the criteria at a glance, determine which level you want to apply for, and then make sure you identify your ACER 2.0, because again, you need those folks to apply. Those ACERs need to help you with your TFI, so make sure that they're there for that. and that they've been certified before you complete the TFI, because quick tip here, we do check that. All right, and then there's a walkthrough process. We have a lot of great details on that at the website, so I won't go too far into detail on that, and we'll have a little bit more time to talk about that today. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Denise Granger to talk about the criteria.
Hello, everyone. Great to see you. We're glad you could join us. I'm Denise Granger, a PBIS coordinator from the Riverside County Office of Education in Region 10. First, I want to give you a quick note about the layout of our criteria here in today's slides. So you'll see on the next slide that when we are talking about our criteria, of course, as several of you have already asked in the Q&A, yes, this will be linked to TFI 2.1. Not yet to TFI 3.0. Look for that big update coming next year. In the chat right now, you'll see a link to the 2026 criteria. So that criteria at a glance is what we're looking at. So Luke, if you could go to the next slide, that will show us that our criteria this year is the older version of the TFI. So this is your last chance to really squeeze everything out of that version of the TFI that you have learned. On the next slide, you'll see the layout for our slides today. So at the top of the slide, we'll have the criteria name. We're just going to do a quick overview of all of these criteria for all of you. If this is a new criteria, you will see that star located somewhere on the slide, if it's a new detail, okay? And we also, at the bottom of each slide, will have the medal showing which level these details go along with. So whether it's bronze, silver, gold, or platinum. All right, so let's jump into criteria 1. This is, of course, evaluating ourselves using the tiered fidelity inventory. Again, we are using TFI 2.1, the version you see on the slide right now. So if we look at the next slide, you'll see that this criteria, honestly, is the most straightforward. Okay, if you are applying for the bronze level recognition, then at tier 1, you only need to do the tier 1 version or portion of the TFI, and you must score at least 40%. Okay. To apply for silver, it's also a tier 1 TFI score, but you must score at least 70% on that TFI. Okay. Then as we keep going in our medal levels for gold, this is where you are then applying for or evaluating yourself in the TFI using tiers 1 and 2. And you have to score at least 70% on both sections, tier 1 and tier 2 in the TFI for gold. And then for platinum, you must score at least 70% on all 3 tier sections in the TFI. So tiers 1, 2, and 3. And you'll notice the note on both of these slides, which was the TFI must be completed for your application, must be completed with an ACER. Your team could perhaps do it beforehand as practice or an informal version, but for recognition for your application, the TFI must be completed with an ACER. So on the next slide, you'll see a couple more details about this criteria. You have to complete it, and either your ACER or someone from your team needs to submit your TFI score at pbisapps.org sometime within this 25-26 school year. If you don't know how to do that, you can always reach out to your technical assistance center in your region. If you check pbisca.org, you'll be able to find your region and who your technical assistance center is to reach out for help with that. And again, for the TFI, for your ACER 2.0, that person must have become an ACER or qualified as an ACER. Luke talked a little bit about that qualification process. Your external evaluator must have been qualified as an ACER prior to coming to your school. Okay, part of your application will be submitting the date of your application, and we will correlate that or compare that to the list of when your ACER was qualified, and we'll make sure that they were already certified before your application was completed. Okay, so that's criteria 1, as I said, the most straightforward. So then as we skip to criteria 2, this is now where you are providing your current year major ODR quick quiz. ODR stands for Office Discipline Referrals. So you are calculating the percentage of office discipline referrals, major office discipline referrals, at your school site within this current school year, the 25-26 school year. So on the next slide, you'll see an example of this, okay? Because on your application, there will be like drop-down menus, and you'll have to choose the correct percentage or the percentage range that makes sense for your actual percentage of ODRs at that level, or office discipline referrals. So we're talking major discipline referrals, not our minors. And if you take a look, you'll see the red word here on the slide, and. So we've got 3 different calculations. The first one is 0 and 1. In other words, students who have received 0 and 1 ODR this school year. Students who have received 2 to 5 ODRs this school year, and students who have received 6 or more this school year. And your percentages have to add up to 100%, okay? As a quick note on the next slide, if you do use Swiss, there's a quick video linked here on the slide for a reminder of how to pull those percentages from Swiss. If you do not use Swiss, we encourage you to reach out to your technical assistance center. You'll see the map linked here on the slide so you can find out who that person is if you need help running those calculations. Okay, so quick example on the next slide. Again, the first part of this question will ask you to provide the percentage of the student population who received that breakdown. So at bronze and silver, you're just giving us the percentages. So the percentage of students who receive 0 and 1, the percentage of students who receive 2 to 5, and then the percentage of students who received 6 or more major ODRs this school year. And remember, all 3 of those that you select have to add up to 100%, okay? Then for gold and platinum, it's all the same, except we add a little something on the 0 and 1 level, where you have to, that percentage has to be 80% or more. In other words, your tier 1 systems are working so well that you've reduced the number of office discipline referrals, major office discipline referrals, to a smaller amount. So 80% or more of your students are not receiving or have only received 1 office discipline referral. Okay. And then also at silver, gold, and platinum, we're going to ask you about data disaggregation. In other words, we don't just want to know about your percentages. We want to know how you are able to break that data down. So what student groups are you able to tease out from your major office discipline referral data? Again, if you are not sure how to access this information, we encourage you to reach out to your local technical assistance center or someone who works with you at your district in order to get that information. And then on the next slide, you'll see just the last 2 portions of this criteria, the last 2 questions on this criteria, which refer back to the question under B. So the question under B was, by which student groups can you disaggregate your data? And then we're asking you if you notice disproportionality. In other words, if one group is being disciplined at a rate much higher than other groups, we're asking you which student group that is. And then we also want to know how you are going to work on changing that disproportionality. Okay, so again, those additional questions are not for the bronze level application. They are just for silver, gold, and platinum. All right, y'all. So those were criteria 1 and 2. I'm going to pass it off to Raf now to take us into criteria 3.
All right. Thank you very much, Denise. Here we go. Moving on to criteria 3. It's the action planning documentation portion of the recognition process. So moving to the first few steps is just to understand that in the process is to identify your tier 1 TFI or feature and really focus on, I guess, some of the primary areas, like focus on the key components of what an action plan is. So first section here is that teams must identify one TFI feature from the tier one, your tier one TFI. B, the second step is to report those actionable steps. Make sure that they are actionable. And the note here is that, you're going to see this repeated through each of the 3 tiers, that your action steps must align with the specific feature. So in the first one, tier 1, your action plans or steps must be aligned with that tier 1 feature that you listed when you first began this process. Moving into the second phase here, I see that there's a missing metal, that this is for bronze and silver. So make sure you continue to identify who is responsible. We're looking for a name. Who is the person that is going to be completing or is responsible for completing and updating this actionable step? Also, identify the date in which the action item or action plan is going to be completed by the next school year. You see here the star. The next step is, this one is key for this feature. Make sure that you have reviewed this action plan with your ACER 2.0. So now before you submit your process, you make sure that we're reviewing, so that the ACER who has been trained in how to actually write a action plan or review your action plan and make sure that it has all the key components, they've gone through and given you the thumbs up that this is appropriate to go ahead and submit. Moving on down to gold and platinum. For those schools, you will continue using the same process where you report one TFI feature from tier 1, but the extra added step is that they should include the integrated TFI companion guide. So we're bumping up an and 1 for this situation because it must explicitly define the mental health and or equity focus. As they continue writing that, moving to B, make sure same steps. We have the same action steps are identified in the original TFI feature you chose, making sure that they're aligned. It all will rinse and repeat for each of the 3 tiers. Moving on down to the next step, who's responsible to complete that and by which date, same process. Scrolling on down to tier 2, same process where now we are identifying a tier 2 feature that you're going to improve on for the next school year. Report the same process. What are those actionable steps that you're going to work on? Again, the same note that those action steps are aligned with the same feature that you have mentioned. If I haven't repeated that enough, that's typically to disconnect. So make sure that you have a feature, what's an action step to that feature. As we continue on, who is responsible and when is this going to be completed in a future date? Remember, it must be in the future. Lastly, you'll see here is that, again, your team has reviewed these action plans with your ACER 2.0. So there'll be a box to check. So we have a paper trail and know who to talk to so that we can make sure to update those should you need to do so. Scrolling on down to now our tier 3 process, same process. I need the feature, or sorry, not myself, we need the feature. What is the actionable steps for those features? Make sure that those actionable steps are aligned with that same feature. Scrolling down, who's responsible, date to be completed, look, let's rinse and repeat. Same thing again, we also check off, has your ACER 2.0 reviewed those action plans before you submit it. So the only real key feature that's been updated in that criteria is that we are now getting approval or review process through your ACER 2.0. Some of the examples here you can see that are provided for our bronze and silver, pretty self-explanatory. You can see there, take a look at that box in the left-hand section to show detailed steps, who's responsible, future date. We scroll on down to the next feature. This really hasn't changed from the previous years. We ensure that we are using that integrated companion guide, that's in the next slide, for our gold and platinum folks, that we are zhuzhing up, so to speak, our action steps by taking a really good hard look, using our integrated companion guide to reflect that mental health or focus on equity that you stated for that tier one process. There are some examples that will help guide the conversation to improve your action steps. So example that's provided on the next slide here is that we're taking a look to see from the integrated companion guide, those highlighted areas in yellow are some of those sections that we need to focus on. If we're looking at our teaming, who do we need to bring on our team? We take those as a conversation starter. The next step, 48, like, okay, I need to incorporate the TFI companion guide, and here it is. Per this, I'm going to make sure that my team has these specific folks together. That's our general conversation for the example. And finally, the next slide is, now that I understand those key components or folks who should be on our team, I'm going to write an actionable step where I'm following the process from TFI feature 1.1. I'm inviting these people. I have a name. There's Danae. I have an actual step that they're going to attend these meetings, ask for representation, and I have a future date, assuming that this is written in the future when we receive it. I'll run this by my ACER 2.0. They'll give the green light. Wonderful. Move on to the next. All right, next section here is criteria 4, advanced tier intervention data. Obviously, for our bronze and silver folks, they'll be working at the tier 1 level. They will not need to participate in this, but it's a good idea to try to take a sneak peek at what is to be expected when the time comes when we're going to be applying for gold. So this criteria is really meant around the concept of identifying your tier 2 interventions and tier 3 when we get to that section, and to see what the response to intervention looks like, how well or efficient and effective your interventions are. We can go to the next slide. You can see here, bronze and silver, you not have to worry about answering this question. Moving on down to the next section. Before you are working on this criteria, make sure that we have some guiding documents that you could use to review. Before we move on with that process, we go back to Center on PBIS with their guidance. The next slide has a variety of other intervention evidence-based practices that you can review to make sure that they are aligned properly if you're unaware, some of those good resources. And we slide on down to slide 4. There we go. Now, there we go. I see a star. Must mean something new. What is this new thing? For this criteria, the first section is that we're asking for you to name and describe one tier 2 social emotional behavioral intervention. Make sure we understand. A tier 2 social emotional behavioral intervention is what we're looking for. Now it's disaggregating one versus the other. And then the following steps are very similar to last year. They really hasn't changed. It's just really making sure that the onus is on us to explain what type of intervention we're looking for. We want to make sure that your description includes how that intervention increases instructional time, adds structure, and adds opportunity for feedback, as stated last year. Next slide here is now we make sure that we are defining how the progress is monitored, report the percentage of students participating. Also, we're looking at the slide that you're looking at right now is ensuring that when we move on to tier 3, same process. Let's review Center on PBIS guidance for tier 3 interventions. We are looking at how are we identifying students for any of our tier 3 interventions. Moving on down to the next slide. Here are some other interventions and resources that you can review to give you a better idea of how that process runs efficiently. When we get into the next slide here, I see a star coming up. There's a difference from last year. So for tier 3, for our platinum folks, we want you to describe the process that your team uses to determine which students require tier 3 supports, that it's based on data and observed needs. So all we're looking for is what is the process that is put into place so that a student is placed into an appropriate tier 3 intervention. The next step, F, is outline those steps that your team uses to select those students for those interventions for those students. Then it continues and follows the same process before. Defining how it's monitored. We'll move on down to the next slide. I see here that another update is we want to make sure that we're reporting the number of students who are in any tier 3 intervention. So what all of your tier 3 interventions that you have, what's the number that you have? In previous years, it was one specific intervention. This time the request is all tier 3 interventions and then follows the same format. What is the percentage of all those students in any tier 3 intervention responding positively to those tier 3 interventions? And we're looking for at least 70% of those students should be responding positively. So making sure all students in any tier 3 intervention that you have. Lastly, there is the Appendix C in the TFI that needs to be completed whilst you are completing your TFI. That document should be signed and dated by your ACER 2.0, and then we upload that. So and if you need any assistance, there are instructions there on how you should go ahead and upload that. Make sure it behooves you to keep it as a PDF and view only so that we can see the document. And when we are correcting or assessing your applications, if it's not set where we can view it, then we're going to have to email you out. So make sure that it's a document that we can actually view. And with that, I'm going to pass it along to Jeremy.
All right, so we're going to finish out here with our last 3 criteria, 5, 6, and 7. So talking criteria 5, we have report evidence of academic impact. So with this one, this is going to be pretty familiar. We are looking at that. What formative measure is the school site using to just really monitor those academic outcomes? And so we want that to be continuous across the school year and something that we can really see. But it's really for you. This is for site-based guidance. It's not an evaluation in terms of like what you're selecting. We just want to kind of help you ensure that students are kind of being monitored as they move through these academic measures. Let's go into the next one and we'll talk some of the changes that we've made. There's that new icon. So as we're looking, and we'll give some examples of what these measures might be, which student group has your team prioritized or focused on when you're monitoring this, and briefly describe why this group was selected. So a little bit of narrative there, and you're seeing this for the silver. For bronze, again, not an evaluation, we're just kind of talking through what are you currently using, and then silver, we're going to ask a little bit more in terms of that focus area and how things are going. Next slide. And you'll also see some of the impact here. We have our gold platinum. We are looking at these examples here on the left of what you might be selecting in terms of what's going on in terms of your academic assessments. And then on the right side, those are some of the student groups to include, but not limited to. So you could be choosing English learners, foster youth, so economically disadvantaged, specific grade levels, or other demographic characteristics. So things to keep in mind there as we look through. And we really encourage you to be looking at that criteria at a glance document to help guide this criteria 5. Oh, and finally, here is an example that's been drafted to help with this. You can see that question A there, they've selected iReady. There's a little bit of narrative of which student group they've selected, kind of talking through where they were and where they're at. And so ideally, we are seeing that progress in our gold and platinum levels, that they're making progress in these academic interventions. And then some of the selection criteria. Why did you focus on this student group? And this should be, I mean, a bit of a narrative there to really give that description to help whoever's really reviewing this application know the intention behind selecting these students and the progress that they are making. All right. Classroom walkthrough. There's going to be a few items in your criteria that you'll be able to click here. So let's jump right into it. There we go. Now, the intention is to report a sample size of verified evidence-based classroom practices that we've observed. Now, your ACER should visit at least 10% of virtual or in-person classrooms. And you're going to see on the left side there of those in silver, 80% demonstrated at least 2 evidence-based classroom practices. For gold in the middle, we're looking for 3 evidence-based classroom practices. And then in platinum, all classrooms visited have demonstrated 4 or more evidence-based classroom practices. And if you're thinking, where are these evidence-based classroom practices coming from? We'll be getting to that. And so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. At the completion of these walkthroughs and your ACER has gone through and done the observations, we want you to upload your team's completed classroom walkthrough tool with the ACER 2.0 signature. So that ACER doing the walkthrough and then signing off on that and then having your team upload that. So that is new and something for silver, gold, and platinum status to really be mindful of this criteria. All right. And if if the visits are not allowed, a narrative describing how the ACER has verified the classroom practices may be provided. Really something you need to engage with your regional technical assistance center on and just make sure that there's some conversation going if you have any questions about this. But some examples here, you could meet with the team virtually, complete classroom practice self-assessments, complete a virtual walkthrough, or complete a randomized virtual interview of students and staff. And so those looking again at that gold and platinum level status. And those walkthrough tools are going to be linked in that criteria. So definitely take a look there. And if you have any questions, reach out to your technical assistance center and kind of see if anything comes up in terms of just using these tools or what other insight they may have for you. All right. And when we said they're coming from evidence-based practices, this is going to look very familiar. We have this fantastic resource coming from the Center on PBIS from January 2022 about supporting and responding to student social, emotional, and behavioral needs. So these are the evidence-based practices that the walkthrough tools are anchored in. So these are what we are looking for in terms of those class walkthroughs and what the ACER should be viewing. And let's go into our final criteria. And this has been a fun one. We're talking TFI 3.0. I know that there's been a few Q&A questions related to that. And we're just looking at readiness. And this is a big shift nationally. California PBIS, we are in a position where we're really scaling up and having conversations, but we're also in that spirit of continuous improvement, wanting to make sure that we are moving in a direction to where you feel supported in this, which is why this year, TFI 3.0 is only reflecting in one criteria of this award season. So what does that mean? Let's go into that next slide. We'll be asking 3 questions. The intention of this item is for school district teams to explore the TFI 3.0 and to begin a conversation on implementing it. Now, if you have already kind of moved into that, your assessment of the TFI 2.1 is what will be used for this season. So all 2026 is previous TFI. Now, moving forward, we'll have more and more updates and conversations about what TFI 3.0 looks like. But for now, we are only asking in terms of TFI 3.0 that your team has downloaded and reviewed the TFI 3.0. Just done a run through as a team, talked through. Now, we are also asking in this item that you have one insight related to that enhanced TFI 3.0. So that just kind of a description of insight. And then finally, describe a next step that the team will make to move toward, if you're not already, implementation of TFI 3.0. Our goal is to increase fidelity, and we understand that moving systems is a big effort and it's very complex. So we are here to support you in your transition to TFI 3.0. And this is part of our kind of self-reflection with sites for us to be looking at this and really begin to adopting these new practices. All right, so to recap on this, today is the official launch. We are officially in recognition season. Welcome. And then our window will be closing May 8th. You will be notified of submission errors by June 5th. And the deadline for schools to do any error correction will be June 12th. And after that, it will be closed down and we will not be able to provide any support for corrections. You'll be notified in September of your award status, and then moving into our wonderful conference, putting a hold on everybody's calendars for October 7th through the 9th. And if you're still feeling after this webinar that you'd like to have some additional conversations, you just need some more clarity, or you want to reach out to somebody, everybody here in California has a region lead. So when you go to pbisca.org, you'll be able to see who your region lead is and be able to kind of make that connection. We can also kind of help tie you into other things that may be on the resource or website or may not be on the website, and help with any of those logistics. So please be in contact with your local technical assistance center. And with that, I'm going to run through a couple common pitfalls based on our data. We, in our California PBIS organization, are very data driven. So what have we seen from previous applications? Typing errors continue to come up. So the solution to this, please review, review, review. Your application will be scored as submitted, not as intended. So if we're not understanding what you're trying to say and we can't get that clarity through a correction process, then it's very difficult for us to know what we are scoring and what your intention is. Outside of that, incomplete answers. We're going to try and be succinct, but ensure your answer is clear, complete, and comprehensible. Now, a lot of one sentence platinum or gold is usually not enough description for us to know. So we do ask that you are, when it asks for a narrative, that you're being as thorough as you can within that. And then action plan alignment. Be sure to write a solution to the TFI item you identified that your team is working toward improving. The solution does not tie back to your identified TFI. It's not going to meet criteria. Sometimes we say we're working on this TFI item, but then your solution doesn't necessarily tie to that. So we're just looking for that through line. And it can be really beneficial to just work with an ACER as you are going through your application process. An additional help coming your way, recognition office hours by demand. We will be opening up more information about these soon. So please stay tuned to join office hours and talk with others who are completing this application as you're working through it, and we'll be able to have our staff give some insight there. Okay, and also coaches out there, good to see you. February 25th, the Coaches Network is returning, so 1 to 2:30, and you'll find more information on our website. You must pre-register to be able to attend the coaching network, and you'll see on the screen right now that there is a QR code. So I'm going to do a kind of a long pause for a second if anybody wants to take that picture. Otherwise, it is here for your reference. And then breakout rooms, conversation about all sorts of everything PBIS. So I would love to see you there. And yep, go ahead and make sure that you register. Again, must pre-register. And with that, our conference, we have October 7th through the 9th in Sacramento. We are very excited to see you there. And just kind of keep that hold on the calendar, and we'll be sharing out more information as we get closer to those dates. With that, I want to give a huge round of applause to our Q&A team behind the scenes here, who's been looks like they've answered 95 questions so far. So that's pretty impressive. Great job. If you do have additional questions, they are going to be use that Q&A feature, and then we will be also we have a frequently asked questions document that we will be adding to our website as well. With that, I'd like to invite everyone back, our other panelists and our team here. Thank you so much. And Luke, we will have you give us a nice goodbye and close us out for the day.
Before we do that, I'm going to just pause for a second, and I'll let Ginny and the Q&A team jump in on any questions that may have been lingering. If you had any, otherwise we will, of course, log off.
There's a bunch still in there that we haven't been able to get to. There's a lot of questions around specific criteria. So if you still have questions or you're confused, please reach out to your regional technical assistance center for help on that. Feel free to email us with any questions you have. There's also some specific questions around the role of an ACER. So if you haven't yet updated to be an ACER 2.0, you'll want to do that. And then you'll also you can review your slides from the ACER 2.0 training. And that might provide some answers. But again, just reach out to your regional technical assistance center. I don't know, anything else from Casey or Kendall?
All
I
really
think
good questions, but yeah, I would just reiterate what Jenny is saying. If we don't have time to answer you back right now, please email your regional lead so that we can get you the answers.
And then the resource packets will be, I know people are used to having things on the website, so those will be available real soon. So just sit tight on those, and if you're looking for a classroom walkthrough tool, it'll be in the packet. Anything else, Kendall? No? Okay.
All right. With that, I think we will go ahead and sign off. And then my webinar team, I'll get a zoom out to us and process any last things we have. All right. With that, everybody, thanks for joining us. We look forward to seeing your application. Again, big thanks to the recognition committee and to my colleagues here today. Have a good rest of your day.